Hello and welcome to the Nurse Linda webinar today. It's so nice to have you with us. I'd like to give a shout out to our support staff who put this all together. You know, you see us on the webinar and it just happens. And I know when I watch webinars, it happens, but there's a lot of people that make it happen. So Julie and Donna and Tim and Jamil and all these people that are working behind the scenes, I want to thank you so very much for all that you're doing. Today, we are very fortunate to have a guest speaker, and her name is Katherine Magnoli. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I was pronouncing beforehand, Katherine, but I still was slow over it. She's an advocate for individuals with paralysis, especially those with spina bifida, but really her work extends to everyone. She's has had a and continues to have a very exciting career, being the author of children's book, being Miss Florida 2017, and working with a program that she calls U-Bites, and working with individuals with domestic violence. So Katherine, welcome, very welcome to our show today. So why don't we start with you telling a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, as you said perfectly, my name is Katherine Magnoli, and I was born with spina bifida, and I'm actually the youngest of 7. So, and all my siblings, all 6 of them are quote unquote able-bodied. So at the age of 4 years old, I asked my mother why I was in a wheelchair while the rest of my siblings could walk. And she told me a wonderful story about how the spine is like a magical tree because it's tall and long, and it has these little magical leaves called nerves that help you move your arms and legs. And she went on to say that I'm missing some of my magical leaves, which is why I can't move my legs. But she also ended the story by saying that even though I could not walk, that I could do anything else that I put my mind to, which is pretty much the reason that I do all the work that you just mentioned, because she inspired me to just never give up and just always do what I thought was best for me to do.
Well, it's interesting that you open with a story about your mother, because I find that talking to people who have been challenged in their life from an early age always will mention a parent or two. Maybe a grandparent, maybe some other people, but there's always a parent who is in there pushing them on, really helping them, making life typical for them, which is a wonderful thing. So what a wonderful tribute to your mother. So first of all, tell us about, you had spina bifida and you have a character in your book that has spina bifida. So tell us about that.
Well, Cat Girl is her name, and she's actually a superhero in a wheelchair, and she helps kids who are being bullied. And she does it in such a cool way because she not only sends the message to the person being bullied that they can go beyond what what their peers are saying to them, and really show the person that they can do anything regardless of what their physical difference is. But then in turn, the one who's doing the bullying learns the lesson as well when they see the person succeeding in this goal. For example, I have a story called The Adventures of Cat Girl and the Spelling Bee, and that it's about this little girl named Alicia Madison who wants to be in the school spelling bee, but she is living with deafness. And her classmate, Danielle Delmonico, tells her, oh, you won't be able to hear the words, and how are you going to spell them, and blah, blah, blah. And then Cat Girl encourages her to use sign language in the spelling bee. So, and she ends up winning. So not only does she encourage Alicia to use her strength as a deaf person to win the school spelling bee, but it teaches Danielle to not judge just because someone can't hear, that they can't do something to succeed. So I think that that's a really great message. And you see that throughout all the Cat Girl stories.
That is a very positive message, and I'm sure it will ring true with a lot of people that are listening today. So then well, I don't know when the books came in relationship to the Miss Florida, but talk about Miss Florida, because people think, oh, it's a beauty pageant, but there's so much more to these pageants than, meet the eye. We've been raised with the Miss America pageant, Burt Parks singing. Well, I am of a certain age, so I'm sure a lot of people don't know who Burt Parks is nowadays, but it was all about, women walking around, strutting around, and then they would ask a question, which was kind of a, I don't know, lame kind of question, but this was back in the day. So tell us about that whole pageant thing, because I think it's quite a bit different now.
So Miss Wheelchair Florida America, which is what I participated in, because there's two separate pageants. There's Miss Wheelchair America organization, and then there's Miss Wheelchair USA. I personally chose Miss Wheelchair America organization because it focuses more on advocacy than beauty. Because believe me, the girls that I was up against blew me out of the water in the looks department, but they also, I feel, are very strong advocates as well. So I was very honored to win in 2017, and it took me a while. I actually participated in the 2015 pageant as well, where I got second runner-up, and I participated in the 2016 where I got first runner-up. So when I won in 2017, it actually was a really big shock. And it came as even a bigger shock because I was a little bit iffy about my speech that night, and I didn't think I did very well. So right before they announced the winner, I actually looked at my mom and I was shaking my head like, nope, it's not me. But one of the judges was looking up at me, smiling and like shaking her head like, yeah, you won. So when they said my name, I just started crying out of shock. I was like, wait, I won? Like, I messed up. Like, how did I win? But so it was a really cool experience. And for a whole year, I got to meet with mayors, and I got to meet with the governor and a senator, a former senator. I don't think he's a senator anymore. And I got to, just travel around Florida. And the funniest part of it all was I was the first South Florida winner in like 25 years. So anywhere that I went in South Florida with a crown and a sash, I can't tell you how many times people came up to me and said, happy birthday. And I was like, read the sash. It's not my birthday. And they're like, oh, what's Miss Wheelchair Florida? So I had to explain it to a bunch of people in South Florida because they didn't know, because most of the winners are from North Florida. Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, those are the places that normally the winners are from. So to have a winner from Miami was very odd. And so I had to really kind of build the reputation of Miami, of Miss Wheelchair Florida down here in Miami.
But that's a good thing to let people know that, good people come from all over. That works out well. So you developed this thing called Ubilities.
Yes.
YOU abilities. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I just want to preface this by saying that it has now just changed to abilities, because I actually Googled Ubilities one day and it was taken by some other company, and I didn't want any legal issue with that. I didn't know when I created it. I thought I was just being like really innovative, but I guess not. But the premise of Ubilities for me, when I did start it as my platform for Miss Wheelchair, was that I wanted to encourage everyone with a disability to focus on what it is that they can do. Like for me personally, what I can do is I can be a writer, I can be a public speaker, but someone else with a disability might have another strength. Their ability set might be art, which I lack in completely. I draw like a 2-year-old.
I'm with you on that.
They might thrive in it, or someone else with a disability might be a really great athlete and might play basketball. So just showing the world what it is that we can do is what I think is really going to bring out inclusion. So that's what my platform was all about.
So are you still involved with that? How do you get that message out today?
Oh, so I actually still do a lot of speeches about it. In June, I went to a summer camp for adults with disabilities, and I got to speak, and they had, many of them had trachs and like respiratory issues. And I spoke to them about exactly what we're talking about, which is, the way to bring out inclusion is to not allow our difficulties to stop us from doing the things that we love. One of the people that was there, her name is May Lynn. She's a beautiful girl. She's actually done a lot of modeling, and yet she has this respiratory issue and she has a trach in her neck, but she doesn't let that stop her. She goes on and she does modeling and she does all these things, and she's a fantastic painter. So that's my point, is to just have people with disabilities, no matter what it is, show people what it is that we can do.
So imagine a conversation with someone that is disabled in some way, and they are just like, I would like to be able to find my strength, but I don't know where to begin. I know things that I like to, and maybe things I used to like to do, but I can't do now. So how would you guide that person to find their strength?
I would encourage them to maybe join different groups, different activities with other people with disabilities there, and really just see what fits with them, what excites their soul, what makes them feel comfortable, and just have them work at that. Have them maybe try out for a wheelchair basketball team, or have them take an art class, have them take a singing class if they want to, all these different things, and surround themselves with people with disabilities that have the same interest, and then maybe they'll find what suits them.
So seeing others in action is really helpful.
Yeah, I think
you can go online and see people with differing abilities doing different things too, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah.
And get some ideas, and maybe even if you are an artist, maybe doing working your paintbrush with your mouth, or with a universal cuff or something, you can watch somebody else doing that and say, oh, I noticed that they do this. When you're interested in something, you notice all those little nuances of things, and you can say, I notice they're holding their brush a little differently than I do. Let me try out this different way. Oh, that works better. Gee, that didn't work for me, but I'll go on to something else. So there's a lot of opportunities, but you really have to be open and seek and find. Sometimes it can be hard when you're more in a more rural area or an isolated area to really find, but the web has certainly opened up lots of opportunity for everyone. So now you're really focusing on domestic violence. And so let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get started in that?
So I actually got started in it back in 2020. It was late 2019. I was at an event for the Center for Independent Living, and I was approached by a woman named Debbie Dietz, and she asked me if I wanted to be involved in a new project that she was developing called the Miami Inclusion Alliance. And I immediately said yes, because Debbie Dietz is such an icon for advocacy here in Miami. So I was honored that she asked me to be a part of anything she's doing. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I didn't even know what it entailed at first. And she actually then sent me an email just kind of prepping me that it was going to be about disability victims that have suffered domestic violence and sexual abuse. And at first I was a little concerned to get involved, because I didn't want it to kind of overshadow the work that I do with Cat Girl. But being a person with a disability that has faced bullying, that has faced different types of abuse in my past, and knowing other women with disabilities that have faced similar episodes of abuse, I felt like I needed to speak out about this in any way possible. So what the Miami Inclusion Alliance does is it actually brings forth the conversation to other organizations that are helping victims of disabilities to not forget people with disabilities in the conversation. So that's what we do. For example, we visited a lot of different community meetings over the last 2 years where we listened to presentations of these different organizations, and we make sure that when it's time for the Q&A portion that we ask them, well, how are you serving the disability community? We know you're serving victims of abuse, but how many people with disabilities are you serving? Because we are the ones that are 3 times as likely to be victims of abuse. So that's pretty much what we do. We also do a lot of disability etiquette workshops for judges for when a person with a disability comes into their courtroom for these types of issues, to make sure that the person with a disability is being treated as an equal, is being treated with respect. So we do a lot of disability etiquette workshops as well for judges and courtroom.
That's interesting because it's probably even just hard enough to get into the courtroom versus being treated equally once you get in there. But let's break it down a little bit. So you mentioned 3 things. I'd like to talk about each of them separately. First of all, the domestic violence itself, sexual abuse, and then let's talk more about this disability etiquette. I always think, you know, if somebody is being abused, if somebody comes up and whacks you across the face, you think, huh, I've been abused. It's overt. It's right there. There's physical contact. Okay, you know that is abuse right away. But abuse in the way I see it does not come on that suddenly. It usually creeps into people's lives, and it comes on so subtly that they don't realize until they're so far into it that they're being abused, because abusers are very clever people. You know, they don't come in and start saying these horrible things to you or behaving badly right away. They start to use different techniques like gaslighting and, you know, making you feel like you're less, or you did something, you're really excited about it, and they're like, oh yeah, well, it was okay. You know, it's kind of this erosion of a person. So how do you identify if there's domestic abuse going on?
Well, that's a good question, because there are several types of abuse that a person with a disability can endure. And I actually wrote some of them down, so I'm going to glance a little just to make sure I get them all. The first, obviously, is being yelled at. And then there's also hurt or hit. Also, many times the abuser will just use intimidation, just maybe threatening and so forth, that type of intimidation of, you know, just telling the person, if you disobey, you're going to get punished, those type of things. Also, leaving the person alone for hours could be a form of abuse, because if a person, I'm very fortunate, I have a lot of upper body mobility, so I'm fairly independent and I can do a lot on my own. But there are many people with disabilities that don't have that privilege. And so leaving them to fend for themselves is a form of abuse if they can't physically do it. So that's one of the things. Also, many times, unfortunately, there will be acts of rape and having sex with a partner with a disability when they don't want to. Also, not giving them their medicine is a form of abuse. Hurting the person's service animal if they need a service animal, and then you hurt the service animal and the animal is not able to help the person, that's a form that is seen as well. Also, another thing that is seen is not letting the person with a disability go out or have friends and just kind of keeping them hidden from the world. That's a form of abuse. Lastly, there's taking or breaking their assistive devices and not letting them have their own benefit money or their own income, just using it and taking it for whatever it is that the person wants to use it for. So these are all forms of abuse that a person with a disability can endure from the hands of their intimate partner or family member or any type of caretaker that they might live with.
Well, you know, those are all very good points. And the one that struck me was the animal, that affecting a service animal. And it's a well-known fact in psychiatry that abusers usually start out with mistreatment of animals, and then they move on to human people. So, you know, if you see who's mistreating animals, they're probably abusive, or at least starting that abusive cycle. So that's something to be really aware of. And that's something that oftentimes people don't think so much about. But when you have a service animal, it's such a critical part of your life that having something happen to that animal would just be a horrible thing. Or your equipment, like you said, if your equipment's being taken away, these are all very subtle things. And, you know, you have a whole list of things, and probably if you are in an abusive relationship, but maybe haven't quite realized that yet. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, because as I said, it comes on so slowly and so subtly that it's upon you before you know it. And so all of these things, you might have one or two of these things going on in personal relationship. You might have all of these things going on. It might be a spouse or significant other. It could be a parent. It could be in friendships. It could be at work. So it can be really anywhere. It doesn't, you know, we think of it as, you know, usually domestic violence is like a spousal kind of thing, but it certainly can grow. And so if a person's in a relationship like that, and you're a woman and I'm a woman, and so we think of other women, but it can also be for men as well. Men can also be at the mercy of an abuser who's a female or same-sex partner. If you find you're in a domestic violence sort of situation, what are some actions that you can do? Because some people are hesitant to report these things because they're relying on their abuser for their care. And if they have to be separated from their abuser, how am I going to get care? What am I going to do? So how do you recognize it, and how do you help yourself in that situation?
Well, here in Florida, we have several ways. The first is the Florida Crisis Hotline, which the number is 1-800-500-1119. We also have the Miami-Dade County Coordinated Victim Assistance Center, which is located at 2400 South Dixie Highway. They offer services such as safe shelter, transportation, and food and clothing. Their number is 305-285-5900. And lastly, we have 5 different courthouses in Miami that specialize with domestic violence outreach units. So that's huge. We also have a sexual assault helpline by an organization named Mujer, and the number is 305-763-2459. So those are some of the ways that we can help here in the state of Florida.
And if you're not in the state of Florida, all states have abuse helplines. They have sexual abuse helplines. They have physical abuse helplines. So you might want to, just look those up and have them handy in your phone book or whatever. Just, maybe you're not worried about where you're living, but maybe, if you run into somebody who is abusive in some way, if you are in an environment where you think you are being treated unfairly and you don't feel like you can wait and call one of these helplines, you can always call 911 and they can remove the person who's abusing you or take you to a safe place. So they, can take you to the emergency room where you can, then be, find a place temporarily to stay. There are shelters. It's very difficult for people with care needs to stay in shelters. oftentimes they're not accessible, but if you've talked to the people at the shelter, they will work something out because they are advocates for getting people out of abusive relationships. So if you are thinking about going to a shelter or some kind of safe place, but you're afraid it won't be accessible, they will help make it accessible for you and find those resources. So that's also very helpful.
I know that sometimes going through an act of abuse can make you feel really alone, but I just wanted to ensure everyone that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the United States have experienced violence by a partner. And also in the year 2018, 20% of violent crimes were caused by domestic violence. So you are not alone in this situation. And there, as you eloquently said, there are hotlines in every state to call. And there are support groups, there are things that you can do. You can tell a friend, tell a family member. Maybe if you don't personally want to make the call, maybe they can make the call for you. There are ways to get the help that you need.
And your life will be disrupted for a little while. If you're able-bodied or if you're not able-bodied, your life will be disrupted for a while, but it hopefully will come out better on the other side. So there's a lot of people who are in rehabilitation who go back into the community who are there because of domestic abuse. So like those numbers, those statistics that you gave, those are really big numbers when you think about the entirety of the population. 20%, that's a really big number. And so it happens to a lot of people. So there is a lot of help out there for you. So yes, it's going to be rough for a while, but it will be better in the end. So think about those. And it's hard to imagine that when you can't see life outside of where you are. It's very, if you can't see, oh, well, if I get away from my abuser, then, this can happen, that can happen, I'll be at least free from this abuse. It's very hard sometimes to even imagine that, but it does happen and it can happen and it can happen for you as well. So anything else about violence that you feel is important to know?
Yeah, like I said, people with disabilities are 3 times as likely to be victims. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when we do speak up, sometimes it can be either ignored or not believed by whoever we do tell. But I don't want that to discourage anybody, because there will be someone out there that does believe your story. Because like I said, when I went to Miss Wheelchair Florida and Miss Wheelchair America, I unfortunately encountered many of my pageant sisters, as I call them, because we're all sister, it's a big sisterhood, that unfortunately were victims of abuse as well. So there will be someone that understands and believes and encourages you to get the help that you need.
Yes. And when you feel, if you feel that you are being abused, then you are being abused. So that is just, that's just a fact of life. So some people, not people who are trained in abuse counseling, but like you say, you might go to somebody and say, such and so happened. I saw a TV show and the man used a wheelchair and his partner got angry with him. And so she took the wheelchair away from him because he needed to be punished for whatever thing it was. It was a comedy show. And it's like, wait a minute, this is abuse. What on earth are you doing here? This is a horrible thing. That's like an extension of your being, is your equipment, because you need that for doing what you need to do. So I was just like, wow, this was really kind of, and this was all presented like, oh, this is so funny. Well, it wasn't funny at all, but so like you say, you could tell somebody if they're not trained in abuse and helping people with abuse, they might think, oh yeah, well, that was really funny what happened. Well, it's not funny at all. It's not funny at all. So like you say, keep trying. Those words of wisdom that you have given us, keep, if it doesn't work out, if you tell somebody who's not an abuse educated person, go on to the next person. Even if you call 911 and ask for the abuse hotline, they'll give it to you. They'll give you the suicide hotline, they'll give you all of that. So it's really easy to find. And sometimes it's almost better to find somebody who's not involved in the situation, an outsider that can help, because there's a lot of things that are going on. So let's talk about this third one, disability etiquette. You talked about it in the courtroom, but
Yeah.
talk about it in the courtroom, but because a lot of that's going to be for life in general. So tell us more about that, because some people are familiar with it and some people are not at all.
So disability etiquette is basically just making sure that when a person with a disability comes into a courtroom or comes into a restaurant or anywhere that they go, that they are accommodated. They have all the things that they need to feel comfortable. There's a button at the door, there's accessible seating, there's, and there's kind people around. There's not people that are talking down to you. I really don't like it when, somebody is talking to me and because I'm small in stature, they want to pat me on the head and things like that. So it's avoiding behaviors like that and just treating me like the 38-year-old woman that I am, because I am 38. And instead of maybe the 17-year-old that you might think I am, because I look rather young. At least I get told I look young. So that's really what disability etiquette is just treating people with disabilities with the same respect that you would treat anybody that comes into your establishment.
Well, when I hear that, I think my mom uses a wheelchair for mobility issues. And sometimes we'll go out to lunch, and your story kind of made me think of that, because sometimes we'll go to a restaurant and they'll wibble us all between all the tables. Now, I know that they have a seating plan and they have to distribute amongst the staff and the wait staff. And I know they have all these restrictions, but there'd be like a table right up in the front that we can just zip up to. But we got to wibble through all these people and, oh, excuse me, could you pull in your chair a little bit? And then when we get to our place, they'll say, do you want us to remove this chair? Well, yes. You're with the wheelchair, move the chair. Sometimes you think, really, is that really a question? I think it's obvious, but okay, I guess maybe some people will transfer into the chair, but I think you can see that's not going to happen here. But anyway, it's just that thinking about others. I think, it's just think about what's going on here before you get into all that. Could we have the table up by the door? We don't mind sitting by the door. We just can't wibble through these tight aisles. So it's kind of made me think of that.
Yeah.
So now you're doing something different. You're doing videos and blogs, and tell us what your focus is there, because I know that's a continuation of your work.
So the abilities program is something that I created during my year as Miss Wheelchair Florida. And the premise of it was to actually have it be in schools to educate about disability history. Unfortunately, it didn't exactly go in that direction. There's a lot of bureaucracy when you're dealing with schools, and there's a lot of red tape. So fortunately, though, I will say this, Miami-Dade County Public School District actually took the idea of the program and created a lot of activities for Disability Awareness Month and Inclusion Week in the year 2018. So that was a big win for my Miss Wheelchair Florida year, and I was very proud about that. And so one of the things that I'm doing now with the Abilities program is I'm taking the people that I chose many years ago and actually sprinkling a few new people that I came across throughout the years. And I'm picking one person a day to talk about on video who has accomplished something great throughout their life while living with a disability. And I've had a really great response to it because I'm doing people of all different walks of life. I'm focusing on athletes and scientists and politicians and musicians and artists. So it's a wide spectrum of people who have lived with disabilities that have really taken over in different areas of media and different areas of the world. And so it's really great.
So talk about some of the characters that you've already, I'm going to call them characters because they are characters, the ones we talked about earlier. Talk about a few of those because it's really fascinating.
So I've done videos about Albert Einstein, who was known to be within the autism spectrum. He had a speech delay growing up. He had this issue where he would repeat himself before he would say something out loud. And so people actually thought he was not that bright, which obviously history has proven that wrong, because he truly was a genius and he changed the face of physics with all his different theories that he created. And I also put in some really great people that I look up to. There's a woman named Joni Eareckson, who I read her book when I was 8 years old. And she actually is a spinal cord injury victim, and that she never let that stop her. She paints with a brush in her mouth, which is why I smiled when you mentioned that. But she also wrote a book about her life. She has a podcast. She's just a powerhouse. She's amazing. So she's one of the people that is on the list. And that was just my personal thank you to her, because she's had such an impact in influencing me in my own life, even though I've never met her personally, but just her story has impacted me. I also have really fun people that maybe you didn't know have a disability, like Michael Jordan, who has ADHD, which is a learning disability. And yet he was able to hone all his attention and all his energy into basketball and be known as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. So that is truly a testament to him, that he didn't let his ADHD stop him from succeeding in his area of interest, which is athletics. Then we have, obviously Beethoven and Stevie Wonder, who excelled in music, either with living with deafness or blindness. So these are just some of the examples of people that I really wanted to showcase how much they've changed the world, and really showed the world that even though you have a disability, that you don't need to let that stop you from succeeding.
Okay, so a dinner party question. Of these people, real or alive or passed on, who would you most have liked to have met? Who do you think would have been, well, maybe you've already told us, but who are the top couple that you really would like to meet or have met?
Okay, if I could have my dream celebrity dinner, it would be Joni Eareckson, number one. I'd be sitting next to her, just asking her 1,000 questions. But it would also be Stevie Wonder, because I love the way that he makes fun of his own disability. I think that that's so cool, how like when he's at an award show and he's going to open up an envelope, he'll say something like, haha, I can read Braille and you can't. And I think that's so cool that he can laugh about it with, about his own disability. But also, I would have to say an adaptive athlete named Aaron Fotheringham, who actually does wheelchair tricks on a half pipe where people usually do skateboard tricks. I would definitely want to like chew his ear off and ask him a million questions of, how do you do that? I want to learn. And can you teach me how to, do the jumps and all the spins and everything that he does? So those would be my top three to have dinner with. And I probably would drive all three of them crazy with like showering them with compliments and questions. But hey, it'd be a fun dinner for me.
You meet your idols, it would be good. I noticed something that you said when you started this particular segment. You said you started this when you were doing the Miss Florida, Wheelchair Florida, and
Yeah.
it didn't go quite as you thought it would. And I immediately thought, yes, that's life, because I think people get an idea, you know, that, well, I want to become, I don't know, a gymnast. And then they have a spinal cord injury and they feel like they can't become a gymnast then, but there's other routes of working with gymnastics and doing things. And, or maybe you might become a wheelchair gymnast, like you were saying, with the spins and twirls and all that kind of stuff. So you just have to go with the flow. You have to be a little bit flexible and adaptable and see how it, but your project turned out to be really great. It just didn't turn out the way you originally thought it would be.
Yeah.
Welcome
And
to life.
I love doing what I'm doing right now because I'm reaching a far bigger audience through social media than I would have if it was in the school district here in Miami. So I find that to be really cool as well, that I'm reaching such a large audience and I'm getting such wonderful feedback of people excited about who the next person is going to be that I talk about. Last night I actually talked about Harriet Tubman, who I think I would also want her to be at the dinner because she's just amazing. She actually lived with the disability of traumatic brain injury and epilepsy, unfortunately due to a severe beating by her master. But that didn't stop her from being one of the main leaders of the Underground Railroad and freeing all those slaves. So that also is a tremendous thing that I don't think many people even know, that she had a disability, unless it was in the movie that they just made about her, which unfortunately I did not see. I usually avoid movies about that topic because I'm very emotional and I'll start crying. So I did not see the movie, but I do know that she had a traumatic brain injury and it resulted in epilepsy, which is obviously a seizure disorder.
That's
so I invite her to the dinner too. I know you said top 3, but can she come to the dinner?
She can come to the dinner.
So she's
a seat for me because I'm going to be right there with you. I want to talk to these people too. That would be so great. I always wanted to talk to Stephen Hawking. I just, you know, the whole universe thing and the way he would make things so simple so that even I could understand it. You know, how fabulous is that? So there's all kinds of people that we can use to help guide our lives. And for me, you're going to be one of those people. So
wow,
thank you very much for coming on today. It's just been wonderful to talk to you because you're so full of life and energy, and you know, you really are living life to your fullest. It's really a cool thing. I love it when people are really embracing. You're like Harriet Tubman. You've got something that happened, yes, and it's on. You see, you've got her characteristics, so you better have her at dinner because.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
In her footsteps.
No, I was just saying that's quite a compliment. I'm truly floored. Thank you very much.
Oh no, I see it very clearly. Now, we also have questions that people write in, and they're on a variety of subjects. So you're welcome to stay on if you would like. You might have some input on some of these questions. I'm just going to run through a few of our submitted questions real quickly here for people that I hit something on my screen, sorry, that people will be interested in hearing about. Okay, I have too much paper in front of me here. Let's see if I can get back to the screen. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and see because I think you guys can still see me. So on we go. So here's the first question. They're wondering, someone is wondering about a doctor that someone with spinal cord injury should see routinely. And that would be a physiatrist. So that's a specialist in rehabilitation. There are specialists that in rehabilitation that also specialize particularly in spinal cord injury. So that would be the person that you would want to see at least on an annual basis to to help with the rehabilitation needs. Sometimes they will do all of your health care. Most of them have gone into a model where they do the rehabilitation part. As you make improvements or as your body changes or you needed adaptations, they can help. Also, we used to say to see a urologist every single year, but that is changing now that you need to see a urologist to make sure that your bladder is functioning, because you don't want to do anything to your kidneys. If your bladder's working well, they come back in a couple of years, or they might say come back in the next year, or they might say come back in 6 months. So get established with a urologist that understands spinal cord injury as well. If you are in an area that don't have somebody who specializes in spinal cord injury, you could see a neurologist, or you could see a urologist that's willing to learn and follow the guidelines for spinal cord injury. Another question is about Botox. Is there anything you can do for hand function besides surgery and Botox? So there is a new option that's coming out. Surgery, they can do some grafting of your nerves and moving around your nerves so that can help your hand function. There are some, and Botox, of course, will help with the muscle spasms. But there are some new devices out with the FES that are done particularly for the hands. They can be FES applied to your hands that can increase your function. There are new devices that are coming out that are the FES that's applied like in on a tape. The electrodes are on the tape on your skin, on your back. I have seen the outcomes. Those are coming out next year. When next year, but they're getting ready to come out. There's a couple of different companies on, and I think there's some other companies that are doing them too. We've done interviews with Onward and Spinex. If you go to the Reeve Foundation website, you can see those interviews. But the results from these application of the FES on the cervical cervical and high part of the upper back have just changed the whole world as far as hand function in my point of view. That's my personal point of view. And that people are getting so much more function. They thought maybe they'd get some, maybe they'd have to go through a lot of therapy. Boom, they're just getting it. And when you take the device off, they thought, well, then the hand function will go away, but there's a hangover time. So the more you use the device, the longer it lasts. And so anyway, there's a lot more to come out on that. I'm kind of summarizing very simply, but those are going to be in the market. They're not going to be experimental. They're coming to market within this next year. So that is something, if you want to look up those two companies, or you want Onward and Spinex, they're both doing those. Somebody else has had COVID 3 months ago, and they have this itchy, painful rash, which they still have. Any information on that? Well, a lot of the COVID information is still being analyzed, but there is this thing called long COVID. And one of the things that first came out with it in anybody with any kind of condition or maybe no health concerns at all was this thing called COVID toes, where toes kind of became like itchy, rashy, change colors. Anyway, it was a complication of the COVID, but this rash thing is with everybody. So it's not something particular to spinal cord injury. And so they're still trying to work out ways to get that under control. You'll need to talk to your doctor. There hasn't been any kind of information about how to treat that. If a topical ointment would help with that feeling, or if some Botox, I'm just talking off the top of my head here because there's no information about any of this. So we have to get more information about that. We don't really know about how that is going quite yet. But we do know that it is an issue for many, many people with and without spinal cord injury. It could be a rash that you've developed that has nothing to do with the COVID at all, too. It could be from the spinal cord injury, where maybe you're getting some hypersensation in that one particular point. People overlook the fact that when they have pain or when they have spasms, that there's something that's getting through, and that's really a good sign. But it's painful, so you want it to go away. But that means there's some message getting through to that one particular part of your body. So it's kind of it's a good news, bad news kind of story. Somebody's looking for the latest and greatest information on wheelchair cushions. And that really depends on what the best cushion is the one that your body needs. So it'd be good to talk to a therapist. You can go to medical supply, you can talk to a vendor. They are going to sell you and hype the cushion that they sell, of course. So going to a vendor and looking at, or going to a therapist and looking at an array of cushions to see what is best for you is a good thing. There's an organization called New Mobility, and they talk about cushions a lot on their website. So you'll see there's a place coming up for seating and positioning. It's an Amazon site. It's in the chat box there. So that's another spot as well. Now this question is very important, and I'm really pleased that, oh yes, Catherine.
May I jump in just for 1 second?
Absolutely.
I just to talk about seat cushions and so forth, I want to encourage people with spinal cord injury or any disability, if you do have pressure sores, reach out to your wound care doctor and they can tell you the best seat or the best bedding that is necessary to help the healing of your wound. So definitely dealing with a wound care doctor, even if you don't currently have a pressure sore, but if you've had one in the past or you know someone that's had one in the past, maybe ask them, you know, can I talk to your physician and just ask them, you know, what the best seat for me is or the best bed for me is to prevent the pressure sore from happening, because sitting, it does create pressure sores. It does create a lot of issues. So definitely, I think contacting a wound care doctor would be good too. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, no, your experience is valuable, please. But you know, even though you have a pressure reducing medical grade pressure cushion, you still have to do the pressure releases and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind too. And if you do develop pressure sore, it's going to heal fastest the more you stay off of it. So just, you know, but yes, there are cushions that will be more advanced that might be more helpful if you're looking for that kind of thing. Now, reimbursement might be trickier. But had a pressure injury. Do you have any information on that, Catherine? Have you gotten more advanced equipment?
I've had a few pressure sores throughout my life, and I actually currently am using a Roho seat, which is a seat that has air pockets that kind of helps, you know, regulate the pressure when I'm sitting for a while. I also have a wonderful hospital bed with a foam type mattress that kind of, what's the word? It like goes along with the shape of my body. It kind of contours to me. And so it helps take the pressure off even when I'm laying.
Have you ever done pressure mapping? Because that's a good thing to tell you if your cushion and your seating equipment, bed equipment is working correctly. Have you ever done pressure mapping, Catherine?
I don't think so, no.
It's pretty easy. It's actually a mat that goes between your body and your seating or your bed overlay and your bed mattress. And it's like if you go to the store and you see those Dr. Scholl's places, they have them on commercials on TV, and the person puts their foot on a pad, and there's a schematic that comes up on a screen, and it'll be red where it's really a lot of pressure and yellow, and it goes off into different colors. So they have those that you can lay on, and you can see where your pressure areas are, so they can get maybe a different insert if it's something on your coccyx that's bothering you, or you know, if you are real thin or if you're very heavy. It will show you where your pressure areas really are. Of course, it's going to be on the bony prominences, but when you put the right pressure dispersing equipment, that red spot's going to change to be in the safety zone. So a therapist can do that pressure mapping for you too, which is really helpful. And they do have it a lot in, vendors do it a lot as well. So that's kind of a handy thing to do as well to help you pick. Now this next question, and this will be the last one because we're coming up to time here, but this is so important. And this person wrote in, the best way to manage foot drop on the left leg, ankle, foot, drops towards the inside while in bed. So when in bed, your feet usually are upright. Everybody's feet kind of tilt a little bit because we relax. And so, you know, our feet want to go downward. But your feet usually stay up. So if it's a foot problem, people will get a ankle foot supporter that's padded. You can buy them on the internet. They're pretty easy to buy and will hold your foot in place. But usually with foot drop, your foot drops like this. When you have foot drop that's turning into the left, it's usually not your foot, it's your hip. So your hip's not in alignment, or your hip's being contorted in some way. So I would check, before you go out and purchase something, because it might be the wrong thing for what you need, I would check with my physician, and maybe you need a hip x-ray, or maybe they can examine you and say, oh no, Nurse Linda didn't know what she was talking about, which I don't. I only speak in generalities, but I certainly would have that hip checked out, because it sounds like your hip is, the muscles are pulling your leg, which is pulling on that hip, which could then, get out of socket, get out of alignment, which could lead to all other kinds of troubles. And so you probably need some kind of wedge or pillowing, or doing something different when you're positioning in bed. When you correct that hip, that foot's going to turn back up into its natural position. So just an FYI, maybe you'll go and it'll be, no, it's your foot. Okay, so then that's an easy fix with those heel bow kind of things. But I think it's probably more your hip. And so I really wanted to get that out there so that listener would be in tune to what's going on there. But we are at the top of the hour. So Katherine, I thank you again very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. This was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
And I thank all of our support staff who helped us out, and we'll see you next month. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.